Welkom terug op GROOTplaas. Ons gas saam met ons vanoggend Mario Cesare en hy gesels bietjie met ons. Hy's 'n bekende veldwagter oor sy nuwe boek Tracks in the Dust: The Game Ranger's Journey. Mario, good morning and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning to you, Dupi.
So, first of all, maybe you can give us a little bit of context. What inspired you to write this book, and what's the story behind the title?
Okay, the inspiration for writing this book is basically to culminate my memoirs. This is not your Game Ranger Around the Fire storybook, but it basically tracks my life from early boyhood through to becoming a conservationist. And then along the way, how I acquired and trained the dogs that we used later in anti-poaching. And I just thought I would compile this in a book for people to enjoy.
So without giving away too much, what can readers expect from the book, and what makes this different from your previous works?
Okay, basically it shows the reader that there's no limits to wanting to become a conservationist. If you aspire to become a conservationist, you can come through from where I came, from my background, which is basically a blue-collar environment, and I managed to come through and achieve my dreams of becoming a conservationist. So it's my life story through thick and thin, through all the normal trials and tribulations that most young people will go through in a career. But this one was a career in conservation, and to the point where I go the full circle and then retire to Cape Town, where I still continue to enjoy the wildlife, but in a different area and in a different context.
So many of these stories are deeply connected to the African bush. How much of Tracks in the Dust is based on real life experiences?
Oh, there's nothing in that book that's fiction. Being a memoir, it's actually frightfully truthful, which is, as I said, it's like walking down the street without your clothes on. You have to expose your innermost thoughts and feelings, and often this is from truth. So you are basically telling the story as it happened, and the stories as they happened. So what you do is you select them, because you obviously can't write a book on your life story. It would fill a house. So you have to select and try and imagine what the reader would want to read, what they would enjoy, and what they would aspire to, reading about a ranger, man or woman in the bush, what they aspire to.
So from all the stories that you tell in the book, and maybe to people around a braai or anything like that, what would be the one story that you always really enjoy telling?
Well, the one story I really enjoy telling is when Saba came of age and managed to track down her first rhino poacher when she was only 17 months. That makes for exciting listening. But there are numerous others. There's a story about leopard taking one of my anti-poaching guys' young canine pups. There are tragic stories as well. But around the campfire, I can tell you a funny story as well, which it doesn't appear in the book, but it has to do with Saba and anti-poaching, is that when we used to track rhino poachers coming into the reserve in the pitch dark of night, they obviously have the advantage, and they're in the reserve and you trying to hunt them down, and you have no idea where they are because you can hardly see your hand in front of your face. Then I would take Saba out into the bush, and she used to bark on the command footsack. So whenever I said footsack, she would bark like crazy, and it was the one and only time she would really bark until you told her to stop. So what I would do is get to all the high points on the reserve, and then give her the command footsack, and then we'd bark like crazy, move to the next high point on the reserve, and slowly close a circle around where we imagined these poachers were. And I imagined we did see a lot of their tracks leave before light, before sunrise. Obviously, they were under the impression that there were a lot of canines being released into the bush. So that worked quite well. Those are just the funny sides of anti-poaching, but there was much more serious times as well.
Mario, we're going to be back with you in a second. Dit is ons gas op
Yes.
Grootplaas vanoggend, Mario Cesare. Hy praat oor sy nuwe boek Tracks in the Dust, A Game Ranger's Journey. Ons is terug op Grootplaas net hierna. Is ingeskakel op Grootplaas. Ons gas saam met ons vanoggend Mario Cesare en hy gesels oor Tracks in the Dust, sy 'n nuwe boek, A Game Ranger's Journey. So Mario, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your dog Saba and when you got her.
She's a Belgian Malinois, and I got her as a result of the increased rhino poaching on the reserve, because the board's restriction on getting a dog was quite strong. They weren't keen on us having dogs in the bush, for good reason. But when the anti-poaching scenario demanded that we use as many tools in our box as we could find, canines were a big consideration. So I was given the go-ahead, the green light to get a dog, and I could choose any dog I wanted. So I started researching which dogs to get. And I managed to whittle down through all the breeds that I did look at. I chose the Belgian Malinois, but unfortunately, they were also popular with the military, the security, the police. So obviously, the litters were booked well in advance of them being born. So I was really at the back of the queue until the breeder, a Belgian lady who bred Malinois near Johannesburg, she heard what I needed the dog for. Then she bumped me right to the front of the queue, and within 8 weeks I had my puppy, and I started training her. And the training started at eight weeks old, with small footprint by footprint, literally heel to toe, and then you progress to a week later you go two footprints and so on. And eventually, after 3 months, she was able to track almost half a kilometer on scent alone. So what we do is I get my field rangers to walk around all day with a few tiny pieces of sponge in their shoes. And then we would take these tiny pieces of sponge and throw them in the bush every sort of 20, 30 meters, and then extend that range to 30, 40, 50 meters. So you've got this tiny block of sponge the size of a pea with their scent on it. And she would pick up this tiny and sometimes they would stick the sponge on a dorinkie, and to try and make it more difficult. She was essentially trained to trail human scent, and that's what I taught her to do. And at 17 months, she trailed a suspect rhino poacher, and from his scent to catching him and arresting him, within 1.5 kilometers. So it really paid dividends. And what I can just say quickly is that people often think a dog's a tracking animal. It's actually not. A dog's a trailing animal. A human being tracks. Dogs trail. A dog cannot track. They can only go by scent and by their ears. They cannot visually follow a footprint. So when you see an animal follow a bloedspoor or a track of an antelope, it's the disturbance in the soil, the bacteria change, the moisture change in the soil that they're tracking, not the physical shape of that track. So that's just a point I wish to make.
That's absolutely amazing. So for someone who's never visited the African bush, how do you hope this book will change the way people see nature and animals that live here, just quickly?
Well, what they will certainly realize is that conservation is a huge challenge today, because everything and everyone is trying to cash in on the poaching and on the abalone and the little plants and whatever akkedis they can export and so on. So it's not only rhino; it's the pangolin are under huge threat, and I didn't get the chance to get involved with that simply because we didn't have that many pangolin. I've only seen 4 in my life. So pangolin was not a big issue, but it is a huge problem in this country. But what people can go to is when they get to the bush, they have a stronger realization of what there is out there, rather than this rose-colored tinted spectacle view of what it is to be a game ranger. So they will have a better grasp of the hardships and the challenges that face conservationists today. And that'll come across strongly in the book. But at the same time, I must say, it is not without merit and reward. So it's one of the most rewarding careers in the world, and despite its challenges. So go for it.
Mario, thank you so much for your time this morning. We really enjoyed chatting to you. Dis ons gas op GROOTplaas, Mario Cesare, oor sy nuwe boek Tracks in the Dust, The Game Ranger's Journey. Definitief, as jy mal is oor die buitelewe, iets om te kyk. Dis al waarvoor ons tyd het vir GROOTplaas vir vanoggend. Ons hoop jy het dit saam met ons geniet en dan kuier ons weer binnekort.